Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Exploring Glorantha, episode 17. I don't know that Evan and I planned to go this long, but this is amazing. Thank you all for your support. Hey, like Dave or Frank, thank you for being on the show. I see you're a first time chatter. Welcome. I am JM. This is my esteemed scholarly co-host, Evan. How are you doing today, Evan?
I'm doing good. Glad to be here.
Excellent. And Rook's here as well.
Hey.
He is awake for the fun, and I'm going to tell you we're going to have a ton of fun today because we are talking about one of my favorite weird, strange, beautifully bizarre parts of Glorantha today. We are going to talk about the ducks. Evan, do you want to do so for those who may not know, what are the ducks?
All right. Well, the Ducks, so they're a lesser elder race. There are a lot of uh, lesser, strange, wonderful groups of beings in Glorantha. In the starter set, they mentioned centaurs, intelligent baboons, mare people, giants, newtlings, scorpion men, wind children, and that's just a few. There are many to be found and discovered, explored through Glorantha.
Ooh,
But the ducks are this sort of a lightning rod, but a Rorschach test, as it were. You either love the idea of them or you might hate the idea of them. Um, they are have been controversial since the beginning. Because they started as a whim, and a lot of people have found them too silly to contemplate. The idea of something that looks like Donald or Daffy Duck running around in Bronze Age gear just sort of breaks the seriousness
or
and
Howard.
so that's the thing, is that that those cartoony ducks are too silly for
Mm-hmm.
some, have been for some time. And there was this reputation, oh, RuneQuest, that's that game you can play a duck in. And at one time, Nick Brook, I don't think this is how he sees things now. He's the maven of the Johnstown Compendium for Chaosium, a longtime RuneQuest Glorantha fan, and an amazing booster of the community. But he did write on his Eteries website at one time that ducks were one of the 10 things that he hated about Glorantha. Of course, these were things that he hated with a good deal of love too. But he thought, they were stigmatizing and they were just too silly. It seemed like they were dragging Glorantha into the bunnies and burrows realm of playing, and he thought baboons were funnier anyway.
Now, two things about that. One of the first games I ever played was Bunnies and Burrows, so I take offense to that. I think we talked about this on Behind the Screen. My drunken Bunfu master
There we go.
was one of my first three characters that I got to play. But also, we got to play in a game with Nick Brook at. You
Yes, we
got to
did.
play in a game that he ran, and then we
I
got to
did.
play in a game that he was able to play in. And we're going to talk about that in about 2 weeks on Behind the Screen. I'm going to have Evan on. We're going to discuss it. But got some art of the ducks as they appear in Glorantha on the screen as we go through this.
So, but the thing is that they did start off, as many things did, sort of whimsically, and uh, um, they just sort of made it into the fiction. There were some place names that had duck on them, but what did it mean? And they We talked to Rick Meintz about this back in our special episode, talking to him, and his Out of the Suitcase #2 article goes into this origin. But
Mm-hmm.
as they were putting together the game, they were looking for sort of a hobbit-like, stand-in, a short, unusual creature. And they were big fans of both the comic book, the rather serious comic book, well, serious and not serious, which is really where we are with the Ducks,
Yeah.
Howard the Duck, And then also big fans of the Uncle Scrooge comics, which while it's in the Disney continuum along with Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge had, the way that comic was approached was a lot more sort of serious adventure, strange and gonzo stuff, but with some things for laughs, but of a more serious tone. And so Ken Ralston sort of captured this in
Mm-hmm.
talking about Glorantha. And in his foreword to the Guide to Glorantha, he says, "And I am thankful for careless charms like talking ducks, because in Glorantha, even a terrible joke can evolve into a race with strange and touching dignity."
Now, if that name doesn't ring a bell, Ken Ralston worked on Glorantha and then went on to help establish Tamriel for the Elder Scrolls game. He was involved with, I believe, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim to a lesser extent. But as we've said before on Exploring Glorantha, if you squint at Tamriel, you can, if you scrape at it a little bit, you can see the Glorantha behind it. Now, Rook in the chat made the comment, Evan, that so basically they made badass Kenku replacement that are far superior in lore. Yes, because the ducks are, and we're going to talk about this, but I'm gonna give you a spoiler. The ducks are not just like hobbits. They do lead kind of this bucolic kind, like Duck Point is this very sort of idyllic place. They've struggled against the Lunar Empire. They actually have some pretty dark recent history in the Gloranthan lore, but also they're Humacht worshippers. They're Humakti who go into the upland marsh and they keep the undead at bay, as the Lunar Empire discovered to their great detriment when they put the duck tax out. But we've got some images here so you can visualize Bronze Age ducks, and I've got to say, the art in the current iteration of the current, I don't know, maybe not iteration, but the current era of Glorantha that we are in is giving us spectacular art, both about ducks, but even the monsters. Like my group laughed. They laughed at the idea of a Jacko Bear until they saw the new artwork and they were like, okay, that's scary. Like not the previous art that you showed us, but this art, this is scary.
Yeah.
So let's get into who the ducks are. Now, depending on who you ask, either the ducks are humans cursed to be bird people, or birds that were cursed to be bird people. They're not even clear in their own lore, and that's one of the beautiful things about Glorantha is that sometimes the myths are contradictory, and that's on purpose.
Yeah.
So, Evan, giving us our high level overview of the ducks. Now, we should say that at this point, that at some point in the history of Glorantha, in an attempt to uh, dignify the ducks as if the ducks need any help being dignified, being the murder mallards that they are, they changed the name from ducks and gave them their own cultural name of the Durulz, which I don't know that that necessarily helps make them less silly to the people you're talking to. But we're going to refer to them as ducks this whole time because that's where we came in. That's what they are to us. So Evan, I'm gonna let you start our overview of uh, who are the ducks.
Yeah. Well, so from the perspective of them being a a bird race that then gets cursed by losing flight and having more human attributes. They would have been followers of the great celestial bird Vreemak, the sky god, and then they end up following the Orlanthi pantheon. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have their own duck deities, although there was again controversial. There was someone who made up some pretty jokey stuff in a fan work, where they were worshiping Huey mocked and things of that nature. Uh,
You're doing us no favors there, guy.
I know, but anyway, you can see the directions that these go. But anyway, so they follow the Orlanth pantheon. Orlanth Ernalda, Humacht, even Stormbull. And Now, because they're sometimes called wereducks, and the other, we have human animal tribes like the Telmori,
Yeah, I was just gonna
um,
say the Telmori.
right? And there are others as the Rathori. Herrick the Berserk is a Rathori. That is a bear person, a person who, in his inner soul, believes that he's a bear and is kin to bears.
Mm-hmm.
The Telmori wolf people. Could there have been duck people, and who there are, most of the animals at one time had a human association. Human and animals were sort of one. The Sunshin people retain that
Mm-hmm.
that kinship. The bear people, the wolf people, etc. Others, like the Praxians, they separated from the animals, but they still live with the animals. And then a lot of people separated from the animals and became completely divorced from them,
Mm-hmm.
and just became people, and the animals were just people, and there was no kinship between them. Are the ducks some mixture of this where they sort of blended together? I mean, maybe, but we don't really know. Um, but they've been denied the sky. They can't fly, but they still swim. They're excellent swimmers, and they all end up in the sort of Dragon Pass area, all the way down to the coast in the Holy Country, um, and um, they really seem to thrive pretty well in the strange magics of Dragon Pass, just as other
Mm-hmm.
elder races do. Trolls, elves, dwarfs, and other beast people, centaurs, minotaurs, etc. Um, were they punished for sins and errors? Were they punished for taking a stand? Many different stories are told.
Mm-hmm.
But they are a lesser elder race, so their lore has been less kept. So it's your Glorantha will vary. What do you need the ducks to be? What roles do they play? Maybe there were contradictory things that happened during the god time. Maybe all of those stories are true in some way. And so again, it's your game. And so the ducks can be tragic, the ducks can be comedic, they can be both. And that is just one of the wonders of Glorantha.
Right. And as Evan was saying, they've shifted a lot over the years. And again, that's one of the beautiful things about Glorantha is that unlike other fantasy worlds, and I'll put Jackals like into this category where we have this desire to make a unified theorem of history. Glorantha goes, well, we just keep evolving. And you know what? All of these things, they're all still out there, and so your Glorantha will vary. So the ducks culture, it depends on where you're drawing from. Sometimes they're foul-tempered ducks, irascible humanoids who walk on two legs, Sartar Kingdom of Heroes. Sometimes they have a larger reputation as being greedy, cowards, unpleasant, and even mentioned that if you mention that to a duck, they start to sputter, which brings Daffy images to mind. Sometimes they are described as being argumentative, isolationist, a little xenophobic, a little bullying, um, which is kind of where my ducks kind of live. Like if you come to there, you got to prove that you belong there. Otherwise, they're just gonna push you around and ignore you. Um, the bestiary in the current version says of RuneQuest Glorantha says that they are respected as intelligent and quick, despite the fact that they lack size and strength, but they are definitely somehow brought into this storm pantheon, despite having their roots and their origins in the sky. And Rook is loving this discussion, by the way, Evan. I don't know if you can see the chat. He is deep into the rushes with us, I will say, on ducks. So the ducks are small. They have this, they do, people kind of have made a hobbit connection to them, right? They're small, they're light. The current bestiary puts them around 3 feet and about 75 pounds. Heads, bills, plumage of ducks. They tend, you can see from the art that we're sharing. We actually had a great discussion about this on the iconic Discord for patrons. So if you're not a member of the patronage, if you go over to the Iconic Production Patreon at patreon.com/iconic production and join us, you can be a part of these discussions. We talk about the show, we talk about Glorantha basically all the time, and we put up the director's cut, the Evan cut of our outline for our patrons to enjoy because Evan just aggregates a ton of data from the 40 years of history of Glorantha on our show notes. And we basically we try to hit everything, but I would say we only talk in depth of about 30 to 40% of what's in the outline. Yes, Rook, they are 3 feet of violence, is how I play the Ducks. I always play the Ducks serious. And when we get into how to play the Ducks, I think one of the, again, we talk about how much we love the 13th Age Glorantha game design. The designers of 13th Age Glorantha give you a nod to this dichotomy when designing ducks, but we'll get there. We'll get there a little bit later. But aside from that, they act, they live, they reproduce like humans. So they have this tie to humanity. And again, they have this corner of Dragon Pass that they have carved out for themselves. And whereas the Shire, if you will, is sort of this isolated and this perfect haven for the hobbits to live in Glorantha, Duck Point has been won through tears and sweat and blood and violence, right? And it's sort of an inverse of the hobbits where you discover the rangers have been protecting the Shire and keeping it safe. The inverse is true in Glorantha, that the ducks have been keeping Dragon Pass safe from this massive threat. And so we're going to jump into the mythology of the ducks right now. But Evan, is there anything like on their culture? I know we're kind of we're
Yeah.
much like a duck. We are just skimming the surface
Yeah.
Of this topic.
Well, and the only other thing that I would say is that there is room for a spectrum of ducks, and like with any society, I mean, there are these, as you say, murder mallards who are there, to defend the community and particularly suppress the undead. But not everybody can do that. A lot of them are just regular old folk, and then some of
Farming.
them are the sort of more buffoonish, tricksterish,
Mm-hmm.
or even bandit ducks. We'll talk about later. One of the first things that came out on the Johnstown Compendium is a lovely one shot where everybody plays a bandit duck. And it has incredible art. It starts it starts you off in Glorantha, and you could grow an entire campaign out of those characters in that play, or you could just say, hey, let's try this, and sit down for a couple of nights. And again, these are, this shows the viability of the adventuring duck, whether the duck is occasionally mundane, occasionally preposterous,
Mm-hmm.
and occasionally a sublime and dangerous foe.
But here's the thing, that's the beauty of Glorantha, right? You No culture is monolithic, right? And I think that the silly ducks have a place in this culture. So you're going to have farmers, you're going to have herders, you're going to have tenders, you're going to have priests and priestesses who don't go on adventures. Yes, typically your adventuring duck is probably going to follow Orlanth Victorious or Orlanth Adventurous or Humoct, but an Ermolite duck would be a way to really lean into kind of the silliness, but within the world of Glorantha, right? Like this idea of, hey, why do people, you're playing the stereotype, but you're actually playing against the stereotype, because why are you so silly? Well, it's not that we're all silly. I'm the Ermolite. My job is to, now I want to play a silly duck trickster in 13th Age Glorantha. Thanks for that, Evan.
You're welcome.
It all clicked in my head sort of perfectly. So let's talk about their myths and their history,
Yeah,
and then we'll get into some of their other discussions here.
absolutely. Well, so the one thing that the Ducks pretty much agree on is that, um, as for most people, they once upon a time lived in a paradise. Their paradise is called Ganderland. Sometimes there are other bird people in the world called Keats who trace themselves back to Ganderland. They sometimes call it Kitella. And there is a relationship, but they've been separated by time and geography, so they don't interact much anymore. But the hero wars are coming, and change is coming. So they started Ganderland, and of course it all gets messed up. Why? Well, the gods fight, chaos comes. They end up following the Storm Tribe, and Orlanth and Humacht, Heller, Ernalda, and they have particular affinities with air and death runes after the god time. Um, they must have their own stories, but they don't figure into a lot of the big stories necessarily. Of course, probably, the big folk are just leaving them out. They were really there
Yeah.
because, those humans are prejudiced against us, and they won't give us credit. But in any case, they almost certainly, well, every living being experienced the I fought, we won battle against chaos
Mm-hmm.
that ends in the defeat of chaos, and with, the end of the Lightbringer quest with Yelm reappearing in the sky, and Orlanth and the Lightbringers coming up from hell. So the Ducks end up in the Dragon Pass area whence time begins, particularly along the Creek Stream River. We don't hear much about them in the first age. Everything's getting established. How did they deal with Arcat? Well, Arcat was tied to Humacht, so there might have been Ducks following him, but we don't really know. Again, this is something that even though Glorantha is a very defined world in many ways, there are vast vistas of
Mm-hmm.
things for you to fill in, your Glorantha. And as JM mentioned on his one of his last streams from behind the screen, we picked up this lovely book, which unfortunately
Oh,
I'll
I've
keep
got
this
mine here.
organized, but the Greg Stafford's write-ups of some of his early games. And one of the things that he already says is that, that apparently is going to be available print on demand. We were able to get it at the con. It's a wonderful book, but talking about, he expects, that one person's game is going to be very different from his game,
Mm-hmm.
going to be different from the next person, that Glorantha exists at the table. And it's, that is what is real about Glorantha for those people. It's experienced. And
Yes.
so,
It's basically what we've been talking about on the Grand Campaign. And
yeah,
I will be honest, John Wick has this great quote that says, if you think you've discovered something new about game design, Greg Stafford did it about 30 years ago and did it better. And Greg has this great quote from 1978 where he's responding to somebody. He's like, no, your Glorantha is going to be an interaction of your players and your GM and the rules, and it should be different than everyone else's.
yeah,
Now, Evan, quick question for you. Rook had a
yeah.
question in the chat. If I
Oh,
may
yeah,
interrupt your stream of thought here.
not at all.
So I mean, all questions are serious, Rook. Um, is there a codified design for the armor and the equipment to the cultures? He's getting this very Roman legionnaire-esque vibe to the Ducks, and I figured that you would be the better person to answer that.
Um, no, I mean, we're starting to see some distinct portrayals of armor and equipment, certainly in the style guides, and if you see in the main rule book for the various cultures, they kind of show that. And in the weapons and equipment book, also has some things identified with particular cultures. As far as the duck, so for example, there is a photo that's, or a photo, a piece of art that is recent, fairly recent, that was put up, and the duck looks like they're wearing a Roman legionary helmet. And this is from some art that apparently is going to come out as a follow-up support, an online, I believe, a freebie for the starter set, where they are putting together a bunch of non-human or near-human
Awesome.
player characters to complement the set of all human characters that came with the starter set. And so one of them is a duck trader that this
Mm-hmm.
this portrays. So there's a lot of inspiration, I think, um, from classical cultures, both in the Mediterranean and Near East. But I don't think that they have necessarily limited it. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Pass is a crossroads. So there
Right.
is cultural influence from all over flowing into the pass. So it's very typical, I think, to see things that are a mix and match of things that we would identify because it is at the crossroads of various kingdoms and empires, and was created. Uh, well, hopefully, we'll get to this some point when we talk about Sartar. You know, the founder of the kingdom, Sartar, um, founded it to be a trade crossroads. He set up markets. He set up cities. He was a great road builder, thinking, if you build it, they will come. If you make it easy for people
Mm-hmm.
to come in and exchange goods, ideas, magics, what have you, that Sartar would then benefit and be at the heart of it. So it's hard to say, if that the little duck wearing the seemingly Roman legionary helmet, if that's like, is that duck culture, and I don't think that's been defined.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you would like it to be, it's like, oh,
Right.
my ducks are like late Roman Republic. That's the kind of armor that they wear. Then that's really cool. But I think you are free to sort of establish that, because I don't think they've quite hammered that out yet.
So, Evan, thank you for that digression. And answering our question from Rook. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you post any questions in the chat, Evan and I will get back to you. But if you join us at 10 a.m. on the third Wednesday of the month, you can ask questions like this directly in the chat, and we'll pause and interact with you. So Evan
Absolutely.
kind of covered the first age, and the second age is where my love of the duck lore really comes in. Now, when we had our interview with Rick, and spoiler alert, we're going to have another interview with Rick, hopefully in May. Really, what defines the ducks in the second age is the arrival of Delecti the Necromancer in um, thanks, Rook. Our design, Delecting the Necromancer. He is a powerful sorcerer of the Emperor of Worm Friends. He obviously is a necromancer. He's breaking the bonds between life and death, and he has some sort of transferable immortality. He keeps like moving from corpse to corpse, and he creates the Upland Marsh to sort of protect himself from the Golden Horde. And what's interesting, Rick brought up the fact that the reason the ducks end up being the protectors of the upland marsh, if you will, is that he creates this marsh to protect himself, and what he does is he puts into it curses and wards against things that crawl on the ground, that swim in the water, or that fly in the air. And the ducks don't fit neatly into any of those categories. They have wings, but they don't fly. They walk on the ground, but they have webbed feet. They can swim, but they spend most of their time out of the water. And so the ducks sort of are the perfect remainder of each of those three things combined that allows them to subvert the necromancer's curses and wards. And so Delecti's ruins live in the upland marsh. His daughters, there are powerful undead and vampires and zombies. I could not take my buddy Brad into this area. He loathes the undead, and so this would just he would need duck escorts. But that's actually why they they are here. They managed to survive the Dragon Kill War because they're really not humans. So again, what we have with the ducks is this really interesting, right? When you read some of the ancient histories, right? Where do the beastmen live, right? The dog-headed men, the cynocephalus. They live on the outskirts. They live on the margins. They live on the places where the world doesn't fit. That's what the ducks are, but they're there for a purpose. They're not human or duck enough that the curses and the wards trigger for them. They're not human enough that the dragons eat them during the Dragon Kill War. So they survive, and they again, according to the Gloranthan sourcebook, here is when they become the experts at fighting the undead in the upland marshes. And so when Sartar comes back, when humans come back into Dragon Pass, and when Sartar arrives, I'm going to turn this over to Evan so he can discuss kind of what's going on in the Third Age.
Yeah. So you have 150 years where there's no human habitation in Dragon Pass. Everyone was wiped out, and repopulation. With great trepidation, the Kolimar founder, which is a tribe in eventually in Sartar, leads people to cross the sort of invisible threshold. It's marked with a monument, but to go back into the past, and they don't instantly get killed. The dragons don't wake up and eat them, etc. And this starts waves of repopulation from the south, from a part of the holy country called Hjortland. And so the Hjortlings repopulate Dragon Pass, and this is actually the era that you can play a flavor of in King of Dragon Pass, the computer game. You're working towards actually sort of an alternate history of your tribe producing a Sartar-like figure that reunites and creates the country of Sartar. But what actually happened was there were these disparate clans and tribes that moved in. They staked out claims. They also found the strange populations like the ducks, and they thought, oh, the ducks, they're small, they're weak, they've got some good land. We'll just take their stuff, which was sort of a typical approach. The strong taking from the weak. And then the two tribes that ended up doing that got hit with Walking Dead coming out of the marsh, plaguing them, dragging people away to be turned into zombies and other horrible undead monsters. And they realized that the ducks had been the buffer zone there. And one of the tribes retreated, just abandoned the land that they had taken from the ducks, so the ducks could come back, and the other actually put themselves under the protectorship of the ducks and built a cooperative relationship with them. And so the ducks became, they had been seen as just a strange oddity, and at least for their immediate neighbors, while they didn't become the best of friends immediately, they gained respect. And then when Sartar did show up and started building cities and roads, he did eventually visit the ducks and brought them into the kingdom of Sartar. They are not on the outside. they are part of the kingdom. And he built a city, and he builds sort of the shell of Duck Point. It's not immediately filled in, but he leaves that as part of the legacy and part of his claim that
Mm-hmm.
his kingdom includes the Ducks, and they become very loyal, and they swear loyalty to his house. All of his descendants, the Ducks will obey and be loyal to, and that seems to be very productive for the Ducks. Although they are weird duck people, and not everybody are cool with that.
Mm-hmm.
They are understood to be part of the larger community of the kingdom, and they become the masters of river traffic, of river trade, because they are so good with boats and dealing on dealings on the water. Um, and then the Lunars show up.
Yeah, and the Lunars hate the Ducks, and this always makes me giggle when I see it in print. So the Lunars they sort of blame Starbarrow's rebellion on the Ducks, and essentially, who I can say this without cracking a smile, I cannot. They initiate what is known as the Great Duck Hunt. Uh, Pixelated dogs go running through the upland marshes, and no, um, but essentially they say, hey, anyone who brings a duck, dead or alive, to the local lunar military outposts doesn't have to pay lunar occupation taxes for a whole year. That is massive. And again, because Glorantha always is about the community and such, kill enough ducks and your whole community basically gets to keep their, doesn't have to pay taxes for a year. This turns into a slaughter of the ducks, but actually ends up driving the ducks further into the arms of Starbrow's rebellion. When Dragon Rice happens, they support the kingdom because they have these ties back to Sartar, and the Lunars haven't done them any favors. In fact, the Lunars instigated what could have turned out to be a genocide of the ducks, but inevitably it fails. And so they throw in with Kalir Starbrow, and then when Argrath shows up, they really double down and they join uh, Argrath's rebellion to keep Sartar free, to drive the Lunars back. And really, this is where the Humakti again kind of come into play, and they are a key component in the freedom of Sartar and Tarsh and the eventual defeat of the Lunars. I'm sorry to all of our Lunar fans. Uh, just so you guys know, when we do our recap of Chaosium Con, Evan and I, probably more me than Evan, directly contributed to the destruction of the Lunar Empire, and
Oops.
I'm okay with it. Um, so let's talk about playing ducks. We've given you the history, the myths, the legends, the origins of ducks, but we always bring back to Exploring Glorantha is the show about why do I want to play this? How do I GM this? Why do I want to include this in my campaign? So, first of all, for Quest Worlds, when it comes out, playing a duck is as simple as just picking your traits the way you want them to be, right? You define everything narratively. In the RuneQuest Gloranthan Bestiary, you actually have rules for playing Sartarite ducks, and we actually had an entire party of ducks at one point in my RuneQuest game on one of our side adventures. Now, I want to talk about the 13th Age design because I've got it pulled up here. They give you two paths for ducks. You can play the silly duck, which I swore I never would, but Evan has now convinced me to play a trickster silly duck. So they get the ability called Squawk. Once per battle as a free action, before you roll an attack or before a creature rolls an attack against you, you declare you're using this power on the roll. If the attack hits, it misses instead, and if it misses, it hits instead. So basically, it's the silly kind of squawk, and maybe you can shift fate a little bit. Or if you're having just a really bad night, hopefully turn that miss into a hit. You can also go, as Evan put in our notes, deadly mode, and you can take the Death Drake ability. Once per battle as a free action, when you miss with an attack against a non-mook enemy that has 5 hit points or fewer, you get to re-roll the attack. If it still misses, you get to use the power again. And as you increase in level, that threshold increases until at 12th or at 10th level, uh, if it's got 50 hit points or less, you get to re-roll the attack. And then some of the feats allow you to be considered 2 levels higher and eventually get to 70 HP or less. It reminds me a little bit of the 13th Age Necromancer ability where they get to reap the soul of any creature who has X hit points or less. So this allows you to really tap into that murder Humakti uh, basis and be like, nope, no, I am going to kill that thing. It's so close to death. I'm going to send it quickly into the arms of Humakt. So that's I mean there's a support in every version of the Gloranthan rules for playing ducks. In fact, if you have not checked out the Glorantha bestiary, please do so. There are rules for playing trolls specifically for Rook. There are rules for playing a ton of different versions of trolls. We had elves in our group. I had one of the fox people in our group. We had ducks. We had baboons. Right. The rules there are actually very I won't say sneakily hidden, but it's not just a book of monsters. RuneQuest has always had this idea that monsters should be treated as individuals. And in the bestiary, they have the rules for all of the cool non-human races that you may want to play. So that's the player side. You have a ton of options, right? If you're playing in RuneQuest, they can initiate as basically any of the Orlanth pantheons, tending towards Orlanth, as we kind of talked about, Orlanth, Ermal, probably Ernalda, and Humakt. Uh, in 13th Age, you can go as silly or mechanically as silly or as serious as you want. Rook, there will be a chance for you to play the Minotaur Beastman in a game, possibly sooner rather than later. But from the GM side of things, there's actually a lot of really great material, both official, but really heavily leaning towards the Johnstown Compendium side of things. Evan, you've already talked around about the Bandit Ducks adventure. What else is available on Johnstown Compendium or officially if we want to see more ducks in our game as a GM?
Yeah. Well, so it starts way back. The free
Apple
adventure
Lane,
you used to
right?
get, yeah, what you used to get in the box, Apple Lane. Gringle, one of the adventures is Gringle's pawn shop, where Gringle hires you to protect his pawn shop because there's some angry baboons who want to come and attack him. His sidekick is Quack John, a duck. And
What?
so
With a
this is
name
one
like
of the
that?
yeah, this is one of the uh, first duck NPCs you get to interact with, and that is available once again in the
Mm-hmm.
Glorantha classic line, and you can get the original Apple Lane. It was redone for RQ3
Mm-hmm.
as well. It's harder to find those, and I think it's easier to get the PDF from Chaosium, or you can get it print on demand if you like to feel the paper between your fingers. There was also a whole adventure of hunting down unfortunate duck bandits. So
Mm-hmm.
on the one, this was again, you could have some real pathos here because these were ducks who had to flee from Sartar, and they established themselves along the river in the River of Cradles Valley. But they're a menace for the newly established local lord, an exiled lunar, but you play as his mercenaries, and there are these ducks disrupting river traffic, and you have to go, take care of them. That again, shades of gray, no black and white. On the one hand, these are some oppressed people who had to flee because they got scapegoated. There were political reasons why the lunar provincial government decided, well, the we can't punish all the tribes and clans that rose against us, so we're just going to pick one, and we'll pick this one because they're easy to spot and they're really different.
Mm-hmm.
It's diabolical. So these ducks flee, and you have to interact with them, you have to negotiate with them, or do the old mercenary thing and just clear them out. And Borderlands is available in PDF, and you can get it print on demand. It's also part of the Glorantha Classics lines, which I think there are some print available.
Yeah, they're really difficult to find
They are
now.
difficult to find. You can get it in PDF. And I love Borderlands as an introduction. It's outside of the new timeline, the latest, the advanced timeline in RuneQuest Glorantha, but quite easy to play.
Mm-hmm.
And Apple Lane, of course, comes back in the Game Masters
Mm-hmm.
adventurer book. And I think we have to reemphasize that pack that has the Game Master's screen and a bunch of handouts and useful charts, has this adventure book. It's really an adventure pack.
Yeah.
It really is a great small source pack for the area, including Apple Lane, which gives you a great home base. Anyway, there is a duck named Gooseberry in Apple Lane. He's a cook. He's also a trickster, and I have used him in my game. A great duck NPC to have. You visit Duck Point in the Smoking Ruins,
Mm-hmm.
the main Smoking Ruins adventure. Then on Johnstown Compendium, besides Yozarian's Bandit Ducks, there's also Bad Day at Duck Rock.
I want to run that adventure, like
Gonna
just for the name.
Going to
Like,
be some ducks there. Monster of the Month put out a, the ducks, they're expert against undead, but they're not immune to becoming undead.
mm-hmm.
And so Monster of the Month put out a supplement, Night of the Quacking Dead. Okay, a little silly, but a little serious,
Yeah.
a lot of fun. And then one of the great artists we're going to have, I think, definitely it's in the outline, and I think we'll drop it in our show notes. There are
Mm-hmm.
some links to a couple of artists. We didn't yank their art, we didn't have permission, but there are a couple of artists out there who are, they're duck crazy, and we love it because they produce just amazing duck art. And one of them, Skull Dixon, has a whole set of VTT tokens that are all ducks from his outstanding art that are also available on the Johnstown Compendium. So, you're going to let somebody play a duck, you're going to use a virtual tabletop, and they want a cool token,
Go there.
go there. And just to finish my wild stream of consciousness talk here, there throughout the old Hero Quest, now Quest
Mm-hmm.
Worlds books, which now are hard to get, but I think they are working on bringing some version of them back. There are duck encounters throughout the 11 Lights, the Coming Storm, Sardar Kingdom of Heroes, and the Sartar Companion.
Yeah.
So if you do get hold of those, there are more insights into ducks.
And honestly, I still think they are some of the best introduction to Gloranthan material that I've ever seen, that I've ever read and internalized. Now, if you are a patron of the show, there is a huge section in the notes on the Keats from the Guide to Glorantha that, for lack of time, I'm going to have to, sorry, Evan, just say, I know, I feel it's good stuff for all of our patrons. Check it out. But we're going to bring it home. Why would you want to include ducks in your game, and why would you want to play a duck? Now, I think that we've covered a lot of that. But again, here at the end, let's sum up. One, they do provide that kind of other touchstone that makes Gloranthan feel unique, right? It makes your Gloranthan game feel unique. As Rook pointed out, they are like badass Kenku with a cooler story and a ton of lore. But they also tie in, for me, to the experience of Dragon Pass. They are not serious. They are not silly. Those are two ends of the spectrum of ducks. They are a culture that you have to interact with and treat the individuals as individuals. When you play as a duck, you get to decide, are you leaning into one side or the other, or are you kind of threading the middle between the two? Duck Point provides a city in Dragon Pass. So it's a touchstone. Your players understand what a city is like. They understand, how Dragon Pass works. But it is a city. It's a place where the two worlds meet. The cities of Sartar that your players will know and understand, and the otherness of the ducks. It shows that not all of the elder races or the beast races are, tribes of centaurs living out in the grazelands, or Mustali working away in their forts, or um, the elves kind of doing their thing. This is this place where the other becomes familiar, and I love that about the ducks. So if I were going to introduce well, I did introduce the ducks. I introduced the ducks as a necessary stopping point along a quest, and then allowed the heroes to hire some Humakti mercenaries to guide them through the upland marsh, and let me put them in a place of significant danger that was well outside what they should have been able to handle, but also let me show off the upland marsh, but also show that every one of those duck members, even though they were Humakti, were all still individual people with their own goals and aspirations and foibles and flaws. So for me, that's where the ducks shined. Yes, as Rook said, they are people, and people are sometimes pretty rad. So, Evan, as a player, as a game master, how would you use ducks? Why would you encourage players and GMs to explore the ducks in Glorantha?
Well, I think, Ken Ralston, of course, we had that quote at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. I mean, there is this sense of, like, I think you can play such a range with it. And I don't know that I'm saying that much different from what you just outlined so eloquently. But um, you can have a lot of fun, and emphasize the fact that while sometimes Glorantha feels like a graduate seminar in anthropology, um, uh, I mean, in a good way, in an
Right.
experiential way. But the fact is that humans don't tell just one type of story. And so sometimes you need to have a comedic story, or you need to have a serious story that has comedic elements, or sometimes you need to have a story where what you expect is the opposite. And so
Mm-hmm.
you introduce the duck, it's like, oh, we're in the silly part of the story. And then, oh no, this is a very serious duck. And all of those things, I think the ducks uh, play that role really well, because on the one hand, we are in this sort of cultural soup where not only do we know Daffy Duck and Donald
Mm-hmm.
Duck and Uncle Scrooge, and to a lesser extent, I guess, now Howard the Duck. um, Good comic book, terrible movie. um, uh,
I can't argue with that.
yeah. um, but um, but also, there were a lot of things, DuckTales and Darkwing Duck. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there have been, we like anthropomorphic ducks, and we like to, and there's been a lot of exploration of that. And um, so there's something appealing
Mm-hmm.
about this in our culture, and to intersect it with this very deep, rich, unusual world of Glorantha, where it already has very serious,
Mm-hmm.
very profound ideas and questions in it, but also has these gonzo things. Yeah, you can play as a baboon. Yeah, there's a bear that has what looks like a pumpkin on its head, and it's gonna kill you. Um,
The Walktopus.
They'll walk the
which is
talk.
way scarier than its name would
Uh,
imply.
yes, that's exactly right. So, for all those reasons, I think you want to look for the opportunities to import
Hmm.
ducks in your game. If you're leery about playing an all duck game, play one shot of your Zarian's Bandit Ducks
Hmm.
and see how it goes. But I think I'm more than happy to have somebody bring a duck or have
Yeah.
a significantly duck filled party, and I think that it would be exciting and funny and a lot of fun. So
Well, Evan and I just got back from Chaosium Con. It was last weekend. Now, sadly, we'll do our recap of that not this week, but in 2 weeks on Behind the Screen. But we figured we would do just a highlight of the thing. So first of all, we got to meet a ton of fans. We got to hang out with Ludo of the God Learners, a podcast that we love. But it was great to see him. We got to meet Robert and hang out with him over the weekend. James.
Brian,
Brian Lovefist, who is probably one of those,
yeah.
uh,
Love Fist was Jason.
was Jason. And then we got to play in one of the games with one of our fans, and it was
Jason.
with Jason. Yeah, it was amazing. It was so much fun. I highly recommend if you could make it next year. Chaosium Con was possibly one of the best cons I've been to. It was small enough that you got FaceTime with everybody, but large enough that there was always something to go and do. We got to hang out. We sat down with Nick Brook and saw some amazing art for an upcoming Johnstown Compendium piece.
Wow.
We got to
Yeah.
listen to seminars about myth and cult. I got to sit in a game design session with Sandy Peterson for Call of Cthulhu. And then for me, one of the best parts was just hanging out with Evan. We outlined the next really year and a half of exploring Glorantha. So if you like what we're doing, know that we have content that will take us through July of next year before we have to have another planning session. And what we've decided is we're going to actually do a tour for the next 6 months of the major countries and kingdoms of Dragon Pass. We're talking about the cultures, the geography, but also what are the major themes and conflicts. So, as a player or a GM, if you're like, where do I start? We're going to tell you if you're starting in Tarsh, here's where to start. Here are the major themes and conflicts. Here are some adventures that are set in here. And here's what we would do to kind of help you bootstrap your Gloranthan game going forward. So we're going to do a kind of a spatial tour of Dragon Pass to kind of start. Evan, I'm really excited about the next couple of months of exploring Glorantha. We are off next month, but we will have a pre-recorded interview with Rick of Chaosium that I will push live and be in the chat to kind of chat with people in May. May's just a really busy month for both of us. So with all of that, what was your top three moments from Chaosium Con, knowing that we will talk in depth about Chaosium Con next week?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, just three. That's tough. But I mean, definitely one, hanging out with JM, getting to spend one on. We live in different parts of the country, and so we don't get to just hang out together. That was great. Two, it has to be the surreal and wonderful experience of meeting fans in person, of people coming up and recognizing us and saying, "Can I have a picture with you?" It's like, wow,
That was
I'm just some guy, but absolutely, what wonderful, creative, friendly, awesome people. And I want to footnote also meeting Nick Brook, terrific, a hero of mine, really,
mhm.
creatively, and a booster of all things Glorantha, but particularly the Lunars.
Yes.
So
And
I'm
we
sneaking
will
in
be
for
talking about
but
both of those games.
yeah, yeah, and sitting at the table for an adventure. I mean, all three of the games I played were awesome, but the last one I played, Waglan Island, with David Millions, who is the author of the draft of the Kralorella material that will someday come out for RuneQuest was really amazing. There was a Keat, a seagull person who was awesome. And I mean, that adventure was just it was so Glorantha, and it was so different. It was so not Dragon Pass. Nobody drew a sword. Nobody, there was, it was our passions. It was the struggle within that mattered in that game, and the quest for enlightenment,
Mm-hmm.
figured deeply into it, and it was just amazing. I loved that game so much, and it's hard to pick out of the three amazing games I played, but that one just edges the other two out because it was just so different, and all the players were just so wonderful
Yeah.
at that table. I really enjoyed it.
Like David Frank has said that he was sorry to miss you at Chaosium Con, but Zio the Keat.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Well, as I said, I'm going to have Evan on behind the screen, not this coming week, but the following week. We're going to talk about Chaosium Con, what we loved about it, what our experiences were, all of the cool things we saw, all of the cool things we bought. That'll be, I think, Thursday the 20. Thursday the 28th. So if you want more Exploring Glorantha, check out that bonus episode on Behind the Screens, or just, wait till it goes up on YouTube. If you like Exploring Glorantha and you like what we do, please consider following or subscribing us here at Twitch, or following us, liking the video, please, on YouTube, so that people know, the algorithm knows that, hey, this is good content and people are enjoying it. Leave a comment. Evan and I will definitely give a response to that. And you could also check out the Iconic Production Patreon. We have a Discord server. There's an entire channel dedicated to Exploring Glorantha. We have some great content producers of Exploring Glorantha who are on that channel with us. Ludo is there. We talk. Tim from the Escalation Magazine is there. We talk a lot about Glorantha over the course of the month, and then you also get the full outlines, the full benefit of the hard-earned hero questing that Evan goes on every month to just produce, that we distill down into this 1 hour discussion of Glorantha. Well, Evan, as always, this is a highlight of my month. I enjoy just hanging out with you. That was probably the best part of Chaosium Con for me, but I always enjoy
Yeah.
talking Glorantha with you. I always learn something. Um, Rook pointed out you get to chat with the casts of all of our shows, which is also true on the Discord. Like, we have a ton of people, both past and present, who are playing in the games that are on Iconic Production, and we love talking and interacting with people who love games. That's basically what the channel is. It's devoted to people who love games. And yeah, so until I would say until next month, but we are going to have the recorded interview with Rick next month. So until June, we'll have an episode in May, but Evan and I will be back live in June, where we will take a look at Sartar, Kingdom of Heroes, not just the Hero Quest book, but the whole kingdom, kind of giving you the overview, starting our grand tour of Dragon Pass. So, Evan, as always, thank you, my friend. This is like, you are the perfect host for this show. Again, I just sit back and I learn.
It's a pleasure, and this would not happen without you and your organization and curiosity, and more than you let on. So
Well,
let's
and
just
and the patrons, right? Thank you to the patrons and the fan
absolutely.
of the show. This is
It wouldn't happen without you all. I mean,
exactly.
Jam and I would talk,
We
but
would, but we
nobody
wouldn't.
else would be listening.
That's right. So until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. We will see all of you in a month. Thank you to like Dave or Frank, and to Rook, and to um, everyone else who watches the show and comments on the YouTube channels. We appreciate you. It was great to meet all of you at Chaosium Con. Hopefully, we'll see you there next year. Have a good one.
Bye, everybody.